Hello, I'm Dr. Sandal, founder of Optima Clinic. The modern medical system is falling apart. To fix it, we need to change how we think about health, illness, and the practice of medicine. Welcome to the show, Talking Shift, where we discuss radical changes to the practice of health, illness, and medicine. I'm joined today by Liz Black, owner of Season of Stars, a holistic esthetician in business now for 14 years and doing wonderful work. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me. I'm really excited.
So let's talk a little bit about what needs to shift in the world of aesthetics.
My goodness.
What works well in the kind of conventional system, and why did you break from that? Why did you say, okay, hang on, this isn't quite right?
Yeah, I feel like we are just overly exfoliating ourselves. We need to protect our skin. And by doing so, I'm a corneotherapist. I make sure that the skin is intact, do no harm, because it is providing protection for us.
Kind of a naturalist approach to the idea.
Yes.
We're not fighting with our skin.
No, we're not.
We're working with it.
We are, yes.
So what are some of the things that make your practice unique? How is that different from, let's say, if someone wants to go to an esthetician and they're used to what that looks like, how will it be different at Season of Stars?
I definitely spend a lot of time with people. We start with tea and we get to know each other. So I have a membership and it's monthly. The skin sheds every 30 days. So it's really important to help that along and to assist with hydration. So it's really getting to know the person.
Cool, so more of a longitudinal relationship on that.
Absolutely.
That's great. Cool. So what about some of the unique ways that you think about this? You're certainly thinking about less exfoliation, more support for the skin. How does that take shape? If someone comes to you for a treatment, you guys have met and greeted, and you go, okay, I have a sense of Neela's skin. How does your approach differ in the action?
Well, it definitely starts with lifestyle, what people are doing at home, how they're taking care of themselves, what their work schedules are like, and what they're eating, what they're putting in their bodies, what they're putting on their bodies. So it's a well-rounded thing.
Cool, cool. And so do you have specific esoteric, esoteric
We have that too.
therapies that people will come to you for? Is it more thinking about product choices? Walk me through a day in the life.
Yes, the day in the life of an esthetician. Meeting with the client, getting to know them, what they're doing as far as their skincare routine goes at home, and what they're eating, and addressing stress levels. So I definitely encourage yoga, meditation, and yeah.
Yeah, it's underrated, I think. Not dissimilar to in medicine. People think that they need some external product to solve their problem. And those can be helpful, but fundamentally, the health of our entire system, skin included, is first and foremost starting with us. If we're stressed, we have all these hormonal cascades that create change. And the list of nuances goes on and on and on. And so when we think about using a product as kind of a coverall slap-on, like we're going to always miss.
Yes, exactly. So definitely with the skincare routine that I customize for people, many people come to me and they're kind of minimalist in a lot of way.
There's wisdom in that.
Yes, there is, because a lot of products out there are very sensitizing. So sometimes less is best and simple is sophisticated. So like with my routine, I do a cleansing oil and has essential oils, and those essential oils have properties that help protect the skin, help hydrate the skin, and also help with hyperpigmentation from the sun, because the plants also have to protect themselves from the sun too.
Neat point.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah. And then developing a proper toner. I actually incorporate some essential oils into the toners just to hydrate the skin even more. pH is really important. So the skin is slightly acidic, so I make sure that the toner is slightly acidic. And I can customize the toner for people. It's just refreshing and hydrating, and then a proper moisturizer.
So you have a little bit of a different philosophy about skincare in general. Why don't we dive into the esoteric a little bit?
Okay, let's go.
And because people, I'm of the opinion that people need to shift the way that they see the world in a lot of different ways. You know, we live in a civilization that has so much marketing and so much distribution of media. It's very easy for people to get caught in the status quo way of thinking about things, right? Like Neutrogena is going to throw tons of money at making people think that a certain way of taking care of their skin is the way of taking care of skin. And so we have to shift away from that sort of commercialized view. It's not that capitalism or commercialization is inherently bad, but we end up getting captured and thinking in this really linear sense. And then naturally the corporations are like, oh, you know, and we're going to try and extract profit from you. And so we're going to kind of keep on giving you less and tell you need more. And so naturally we get to a point where we need to change. We need to be a little bit more open-minded. What are some of the esoteric secrets of a holistic esthetician?
What I love is that if you take the word derma and rearrange those letters, it forms dream.
Okay.
So our skin tells a story. It tells where we've been and where we're going.
Okay.
So I'm a facilitator for a new dream. So the skin sheds every 30 days, just like the moon phases.
Okay,
so
interesting.
Really syncing up with nature is really important.
That's an interesting point. I am definitely a naturalist at heart. And I think the scientific defense of that is that our science of human biology is still evolving. We're still infants. Like the people in 50 years are going to go, wow, those guys thought that, geez. You know, just the way that we think about people 50 years, 100 years ago, we go, God, leeches, you sure?
Right.
And the reality is that the human body is incredibly sophisticated. And like you said, you know, simple is sophisticated. It's also very simple. Natural things work. And so when we get into this combat with the natural world, we're not usually doing something that ends up down a good road.
Right.
I like you were talking about how plants also have to protect themselves against sunlight. Let's talk about sunlight and its role in natural skin health. What's your opinion on sunscreen?
Well, there's sunscreen and then there's sunblock.
Okay.
So sunscreen has chemicals in it that absorb the rays into the skin and breaks up the rays in the skin. So it's very irritating, and those can be carcinogenous. And then the sunblock, which is what I recommend, is using titanium dioxide and zinc oxide. And it's like crushed up ground minerals and putting it on the skin, and it reflects the rays off the skin. So I prefer a mineral block, all organic mineral block over the chemical sunscreen.
Something that, again, is a little simpler, not creating a sort of aggravating process in the skin cells themselves.
Yes, and those chemical blocks also may have nanoparticles.
Yeah.
So that's probably not good.
Yeah, and also sometimes some zinc and titanium is also nanoparticleized, so that's something to watch out with some of those. Now, I'm sure that you see people coming in who don't have the same philosophy to start with. Do you see a lot of difference in the skin quality of people who use sunscreen versus sunblock versus don't use anything at all? What's your experience with kind of seeing how that works?
Well, it's not 100% because the eyes actually pick up the UVs and signal to our brain to produce more melanin to protect the skin.
Right, there's a natural signal there.
Correct, yeah. And our skin actually feels the heat of the sun, so it also sensors to the brain to produce more melanin. So I would say that it's really important to eat a high antioxidant diet and to also wear sunblock. But I think it's also important to enjoy the sun without sunblock, like 5 minutes a day, and just absorb the light and just through your eyes and through your body, because it provides vitamin D.
People nowadays always want to ignore the complex realities of our biology, right? They always want to simplify it so they can control it. And you're exactly right. There's this reality. Our bodies have adapted to sunlight in this ultra complicated way. And again, simple is sophisticated, right? The biochemistry of it is really complicated, way more complex than people generally give it credence. But the functionality of it is really simple. Go outside, do natural things, and your body does natural things. But those natural things are really complicated. I love how you brought up that the eyes have an adaptation. They react to full spectrum sunlight. I was reading a really interesting study recently. Since we have begun using sunscreens, while dermatology likes to talk a lot about the benefit of sunscreen, one of the troubles with modern medicine is that everybody's quite siloed and specialized. And so dermatologists are like, hey, we need to reduce melanomas and basal cell carcinomas and skin cancers because that's my field. And so they recommend sunscreens. Well, it turns out that if you're not getting sunlight, if you're not enjoying the sun without contacts or eyeglasses, without sunblock or sunscreen, sometimes there are actually a whole host of other cancers that go dramatically up in rate. So sun is actually, in some regards, the science is starting to show anti-carcinogenic. And so we kind of are in this complicated situation where people are like, oh, well, I don't want skin cancer. Well, we also don't want breast cancer. So how do we find a balance for those things? So I like your point that, yes, if we're going to be out on the beach, it probably makes sense to use some sunblock and not get crisped.
Yeah, during peak hours, yeah.
But also, we need to enjoy some sunlight. Our skin expects to have that. Our eyes, and therefore our brain, expect to have that stimulation. We see a lot of the proof of that in circadian rhythms. With the blue light interference on our circadian rhythms and sleep quality.
And fluorescent lighting.
There's all of this complexity. And it's amazing to me. It's like we've made this hard for ourselves.
We have.
If we just did things in a naturalist way, we'd be in great shape. And yet we add in all this complexity. We're like, well, I really want to read a book at midnight. Well, this is a cool way to think about these things. I'm glad that there's a practitioner in town who is thinking with a more naturalist philosophy.
Following a natural rhythm is really best for all of us. So
that constantly rings true. That's a big shift. So many things in our lives, people want to avoid the natural rhythm or believe that we have control over the natural rhythm. I don't have to do things the same way that my ancestors did them. Our science is not that developed yet. In many ways, we're still absolutely infants in our understanding of human biology. And so when we make these big dramatic interventions, we're like, okay, let's just hide from the sun 100% of the time. You go outside, make sure you're slathered in sunscreen, big giant safari hat, and then go and hide inside, and you won't get skin cancers. It's like, yeah, okay, what happens to everything else? Like, well, I don't know, that's not my field. I'm just worried about skin cancers. Like, okay.
Exactly.
Are we missing something here? Probably, but yeah. Well, cool, cool.
I think there was even a study done by Dr. Helen Shaw, and the melanoma skin cancer rate seemed to increase with exposure to artificial lighting.
Interesting.
And I've seen clients come in with more melasma, more pigmentation on the face, not because of the sun, but because they're in front of the screen.
Interesting.
All day. So
I think that people underestimate how bright those screens can be.
Right. Yeah.
It's a lot of energy output. Yeah. Well, and it's interesting if we go back to the root of things and we stop causing dysfunction, then naturally there's less that we have to then intervene with. There's that old adage that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And I see that being true in medicine all the time. Medicine is really calibrated. Conventional medicine is really calibrated way down here at the point of injury. It's like, oh, you're falling over? Like, let's fix you.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, but there was a whole lead-up process to that. And similarly, if people are, it sounds like you're saying, able to think about their skin care and see that as a map of their path, their dream.
Yes.
And they start to nip problems in the bud when they show up, rather than, okay, well, this is just aging and there's nothing I can do about this, and okay, now I really need a whole bunch of intervention. Well, why don't we address this way down here at a more natural level?
Right.
I love that.
About exfoliation, I do love to exfoliate the skin, but it's just facilitating the exfoliation, not over exfoliating. So I think a lot of med spas, clinics are doing just too much exfoliation with the chemical peels and the lasers and...
A market loves an intervention. There's a sort of placebo effect we know in medicine as well. You know, if you jab someone with a needle, regardless of what's in it, they go, oh, something happened, right?
Yeah. Yes. So, and I've seen it with clients that have, you know, gone on a series of peels and then took a break and got pregnant.
Okay.
And then, you know, when you get pregnant, you have more hormones and you start to see that melasma. And she saw the melasma after her firstborn, but then with her secondborn child, she came to me and we were doing more holistic care and she didn't have that.
Awesome.
She didn't have that melasma issue. So that was interesting because we weren't over exfoliating the skin.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Well, that's fascinating.
Yeah.
It's good to collect all these different case studies. I always love it when
It
when we challenge the status quo. Again, we live in this really marketed environment, and people are very used to their routines, and their friends, you know, heard it from a commercial, and people just get started. I think it's really valuable for people to get exposure to alternative concepts. And at the end of the day, it comes down to trying things out. You know, we can run our own little scientific experiments. We are all biologically unique. What works for one person might not work for another person. At the end of the day, we can go over all these different theories and say, oh, well, this or that or this. But then when Liz or Neela tries something, and we're like, okay, well, that clearly works for me.
Right.
And we might even do an A/B test, and we say, okay, I'll try this one, and I'll be skeptical. I'll try this one. I'll compare the two. That's the natural process of science. And if we shift from believing what we're marketed and instead trust ourselves and our experience, and again, you know, apply science to that, we generally get a lot better outcome. That's a big shift I'd love to see in skincare.
Yeah. Yeah, we're working on it.
That's awesome. Liz, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.
Appreciate you being here.
Yes, thank you.